So the next wave of stadiums was the convertible, the football and baseball stadiums. And the A's are still, I think they're the only ones left
Yeah, but
in a
still there,
convertible
baby.
stadium, right? How many
Yeah,
it used to be a time where almost every team played in a convertible stadium like that.
I actually tweeted out a couple years ago when the Raiders left.
Yep.
I knew, popped in my head. And I knew this was it. This was end of an era. The last time you would see a
Infield dirt.
infield dirt on a football field, or hash marks on a baseball field.
Yeah.
So I remember that date. I mean, that was definitely an end of an era. I mean, you had 1912 to 1915, you had this big building boom. Yankee Stadium came along in 23. Cleveland Municipal came along in 32. Until then, you didn't, those ballparks, most of those lasted 50 years. The Crosley lasted until 1970. Forbes lasted until 1970. Shibe Park lasted until 1970. Comiskey Park lasted all the way to 90.
I went to the last night game at Comiskey Park.
Did you?
I was 3 years old, but I remember leaving on my dad's shoulders, and I remember the white, all the bricks, they had whitewashed them all white because they didn't want to replace any of the masonry. So instead they would just cake on, you get an old apartment and you can barely see the old sconces and stuff because it's it's under so many things of white paint. That was old Comiskey Park. And I remember the green C's that were painted on the outside of the stadium. So that's what I remember. As a 3-year-old, I remember leaving on my dad's shoulders and people being really sad that was the last night game. I think there was one more game the next day, but
right, it's against the Mariners, I believe.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. At least you can say you were there. I was old enough to have done it if I've gone during my high school days, but didn't get to make it before 1990.
Yeah.
But I remember watching games on TV at that place.
I just feel I'm still kind of bummed that I never went to the original Yankee Stadium. I definitely could have. I remember going on a family vacation in New York, and I should have asked my parents because I would love to have seen the place where Babe Ruth played. That would have been amazing.
Right now,
sort of
the place that. Unfortunately, it's my opinion, and
me too.
Most New Yorkers agree with me that the 74 to 75 renovation ruined place. It's not. It wasn't the same. It wasn't.
They gutted it, right? They gutted it, and
they lowered the field 6 feet. They took out. I mean, they took out all the support columns, and they added. So in order to do that, they added 12 rows to the upper deck to counterweight. So that got rid of the freeze. The signature freeze of the ballpark and the roof, and
I went to old Yankee Stadium, and it definitely didn't feel like Wrigley Field. It definitely didn't feel like Fenway. It felt more like New Comiskey. Honestly, it felt like New Comiskey.
Yeah, exactly, because they had those hideous round ramps.
Out
in the outfield. I mean, it wasn't. I didn't, unfortunately. Wasn't old enough to make it to the original Yankee Stadium, but I made it to the renovated version, and that's the exact same feeling I got was U.S. Cellular guaranteed rate field. So
exactly.
Okay, so I didn't really miss because
you can go to the south side of Chicago. That's basically
I've been to Fenway and Wrigley, and it feels like the sport feels different. I can't explain it, but it's so intimate. It's this is how baseball, because now it's so big and grandiose, but when you're in those tiny ballparks, it's just I don't know. It just feels like a different sport, man. It's so fun. I really love it there. Yeah.
It's a different place. It's a different place to vend Wrigley Field. So
let's talk about
I'll say this. I have not been to Wrigley Field in probably 8 or 9 years, and they've done a lot of renovations of it. They were always sort of doing renovations of it and stuff. But I remember when I was vending, they still didn't have a jumbotron. Let's just say that, right? Like I've seen on TV that they have a jumbotron now, and it's just like, oh, really, really? I mean, yeah, okay, but like also really, but it was just a different place to vend. So like one of the main things, and one of the things that I think they did with their renovations is this was back again. This wasn't like ancient history. This was the aughts. This was 2005 to 2010. They had so few places for concessions that people, really bought a lot more from seat vendors. So we would have, in a normal stadium, I think you have, you might like for a big night, you might have like, 80 beer vendors, and then maybe like 15 food guys or something. But every Cubs game, there's like 250 vendors, right? And like half of them were on food because not only was there just like not a lot of places for concessions. So like most people, you get a hot dog at Wrigley Field, you were getting it from a hot dog vendor. But also there's a ton of, especially behind the support columns. So, there's the big sections, a huge amount of the lower deck sections are underneath the overhang of the upper deck at Wrigley. And those sections are just so massive. And there might be 45 or 50 seats, in between two rows there. You want to get up, and go get food. You got to ask 25 people to stand up. So you're just like, fuck it. We'll just get the peanut guy.
Right.
Get the peanut guy. Yeah. And, there's so little space there. We had to get our assignment. We had to like organize ourselves with the union and get our assignment in a warehouse across the street. So you'd only enter the stadium once you had your assignment. And I mean, some of those commissaries were just tiny, tiny little spaces that they'd like carved out of nothing to be like, all right, here, we put a fridge in here. And you can, and you were waiting to get your food basically in the area where all the other fans were walking around. It was like that. And I think that that's similar to Fenway. There's the most vendors I think are at Wrigley Field and Fenway Park because there's just less room for all the
They didn't concourse. Having huge open concourses wasn't a thing back in 1912.
Exactly.
And going back to ballparks back in 1910, 1912, they were built within the confines of a city block.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And that's it. And each city block's shaped different, and that's why you had all these different quirks and shapes of stadiums. Like the Baker Bowl was 280 down the line. Fenway Park, you had to have the green monster because
Polo Grounds was like 500 feet.
On the other side of the fence is the street, right?
Yep.
So, Crosley Field was built 10 feet down on one side of the, it was kind of on a hill. So in order to hold the fence up, they had to have a sloping, the field sloped to hold the fence up. So you got all these little quirks. And you didn't have enough room to have anything in there.